and he gave us a wonderful talk a on emotional sobriety. So we want to continue with where we left off from last week. And tonight, I want to introduce somebody who's worked with Alan and along those lines, and very kindly agreed to be with us tonight. And then next week we'll have Alan back again. So we'll do a continuation of this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian. Over to you, Brian. Thank you so much for coming.
There we go. It worked. Well, I'm very grateful to be here today. I just want to thank you, Patrick, for inviting me. I also want to thank Alan Berger for thinking of me and recommending me and trusted me to continue on with the second part of this talk. It's really cool. Well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to start with saying this happens to me every time I talk in front of a group of people. I am just so anxious and nervous. And it always happens to me. And I didn't used to understand it. And I'm starting to, as I learn a bit more about this stuff, it's just because I put so much damn pressure on myself to be better than I am. It's like I'm not good enough just being who I am and knowing what I know and bringing what I bring to the table. And so got this part of me that jumps in out of the back of my head and says, you got to hit this out of the park. You got to, live up to people's expectations. You got to do Alan justice, and you got to do the subject justice, and all of you, I don't want to waste your time. And so it's just, it's important for me, I've realized, to just say and own the fact that I'm doing this to myself right now. And I find it very helpful to move through my anxiety and my nervousness. And even as I'm talking about it, I'm feeling a bit more comfortable. So I think that that's just something that I've learned that I find very helpful. So I'll sort of move into this more. Yeah, my goal, I guess, what I also want to say, just to sort of ground myself and also orient all of you to what my goal is here today, is I just like for everybody to hopefully leave with a little bit more than when you came in. And so you have just something, just even if it's a tiny bit more, then I think I'd be happy with myself and the presentation today. So I think I'm going to take Alan's lead and sort of steal his format a bit. And I'll start with talking a bit about myself, just so that you understand a bit about me, where I come from and what I'm about. And then I'll jump into talking more about the subject. And so my name is Brian. I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for 4 years now. I got 4 years, January 27th. And I think when I look back at my life, I realized that I was primed to be an alcoholic from a very early age. I've got this very vivid memory of being a kid. I think I was in first grade, and we got out for recess, where everybody goes and plays, and all the other kids run out, and they're jumping and playing and engaging with each other. And for some reason, I just couldn't. I have this memory of me walking out the doors, and I hugged onto this blue pole. And I was so scared and so anxious, and I was sitting there watching everybody else play and having fun, and I could not figure out why I couldn't get myself to go out there and engage with people. And I sat there hugging that pole for a while, and I just started crying, because I was just in so much pain and so much distress, and I didn't know how to help myself, and no one was helping me. But that's sort of been the story of my life, is just being really afraid all the time of showing people who I am and being real and authentic, because I don't know where I learned it, but I have this idea in my head. I've realized that I'm just not good enough the way that I am and who I am. And so it leads to me just not feeling like I fit in any times. I'm always separate. I'm always different, and always trying to be something that I'm not, and so on and so forth. And so, but the moral of the story is I've just been profoundly uncomfortable with myself and in my body for, well, I mean, even today, it's a struggle. When I was 17, I found, substances helped me with that. And I fell deeply into that world. And I remember going to a friend and talking to him, and It was the first time I had been intoxicated, and I went and talked to him. I said, "Man, I tried this stuff out, and all that chatter in my head, all that noise, it went away. It's like a miracle." He's like, "You got to try it." And I remember his reaction. I thought he was crazy in the moment. When I look back, I realized I was the crazy one. He said, "That doesn't sound very good." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about," but so I was off to the races, and it took me a while to figure this out. What brought me to wanting to get sober was I realized I was in trouble. I didn't realize what the problem was, and I sought out some personal therapy, and that's how I met Alan. And that was when I was 21 or 22 when I met him, and so I started working with him for a little bit, and then I wanted to go do some more experimentation, and so I did that for a few more years, and then was blacking out and crashing my car, and I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I have a medical condition, and so I'd pass out and almost died a few times, and I realized I was in quite a bit of trouble, so I went out and sought some more help, and this time I found myself much more willing to let people help me, and so I got myself into an outpatient treatment program over here in Southern California, and I went there for 9 months, and that ended up being the experience that I needed to have to see what I was and to identify what my problem was, and also figure out what the solution is. That whole time I've been working with Alan in personal therapy and also professionally ever since. We've got sort of a complex relationship, but he's a very special man to me, and I think you might have seen that last week is probably why there was some good feedback. But right off the bat, I got introduced to emotional sobriety. He brought me into it. So I as soon as I started getting sober, I started working on this stuff and really trying to apply these concepts to myself in my life. And I have to tell you, it was, I had this idea in my head that my whole life, that life is shit and full of suffering, and you just do the best you can until one day you die. And so it's like you just got to get messed up anytime you can just to get that little moment of breath. And I lived most of my life up until this point with that idea. But once I met Alan and I started getting exposed to this material, I started getting excited because I realized at that moment that it didn't have to be that way. This idea that I was so firmly rooted in that I was going to be suffering for the rest of my life and couldn't do anything about it was a lie I was telling myself. And once I started really letting that grow inside of my head, I realized that I had to make this the central focus of my life. And so that's what I did. I was already working towards being a therapist at that time. It was a career I got into for all the wrong reasons, but it ended up being something that fit pretty well. I wanted to monetize my codependency. Is what I initially got into it for. But yeah, so at this point, really, I think that this stuff is really, it's the answer to the human condition, at least in my experience and with myself and the people I work with, that this material has the potential to free ourselves from all of the things that we do to torture ourselves and keep ourselves trapped, and it leads to beautiful blossoming relationships, which I think is something that's just really been bringing a lot of value to my life recently. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'd like to share about myself, or if I should just jump into this talk. Yeah, I can say this. I've been a therapist for 5 years now. I'm a licensed therapist here in Southern California. I practice in private practice. I also work alongside with Alan. We work with families and clients, and I integrate this into my work. I guess I say that just to say a little bit more about myself. But I think at this point, if something else comes up later, I can say it. But I'll probably jump into my talk. So what I'd like to do. Can I share my screen? I can't. Could I get permission to share my screen? Because I have a little.
Just give me 1 second, and I'll get it for you.
Thank you. I have a little slideshow I made.
Go ahead.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. And then we'll go ahead and start this. Can everybody see that all right? Patrick, if you just nod your head, if you can see it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, so let's get started then. So what I did today is I listened to Alan's talk from last week, and what I thought that I would do would be to do a bit of recapping what I thought was particularly relevant to my talk today, and then segue that into getting a bit more granular with what I would call a principle of emotional sobriety to help make this big idea a bit more tangible and help you all find ways to integrate this into your life. And so you're going to hear a bit of repeat if you listen to last week's talk, but I think that there's probably some new people here and you still might find some value, because every time I reread this stuff, I find more and more helpful things. And so I think what I've noticed just in meetings in my personal experience is a lot of people talk about emotional sobriety, but until I had met Alan, I hadn't heard anybody that actually explained what it is. And so I think it's helpful to define what exactly is emotional sobriety. At least this is my definition. Everybody's, of course, entitled to come up with their own. But I think about it like this. So this is part of Alan's talk, which is the difference between stage 1 and stage 2 recovery. And so stage 1 recovery by Ernie Larson was defined as breaking the bonds of our primary addiction. And what he said was we need to achieve physical sobriety in order to be able to learn from and integrate new experiences. Abusing substances substantially affects our ability to do the deeper work required to gain emotional sobriety. And these aren't exact quotes, obviously, I'm paraphrasing. And then once we are able to break the bonds of our primary addiction, our brains start working better and we start being able to integrate and learn from new experiences. I mean, there's just tons of research on what happens when people are intoxicated and trying to learn. It just doesn't work very well. There's just a huge limitation. And so it's a necessary step in order to be able to figure out what's really going on, so we can get a clear look at it and get a new perspective. And stage 2 recovery, which is, it's the deeper work, also could be defined as addressing the underlying patterns and habits that led to our addictions in the first place. And this would be constituted by all of the behaviors that we developed in order to try to feel okay. Stage 2 recovery is working toward living life on life's terms. Let's go ahead and jump on here. So another way that I can define emotional sobriety is by defining its opposite, the opposite side of the spectrum, which I would call emotional dependency. And emotional dependency, I think about it this way, which is I'm okay if, which is it's a demand for the possession and control of the people and places around us. We become disturbed when people, places, and things are not the way they are supposed to be. And when we are emotionally dependent, we are environmentally supported, which means that we need the people around us and the environment around us to meet our needs and take care of us, because we do not have the ability to take responsibility for ourselves and take care of ourselves. And the movement towards and the striving towards emotional sobriety is I would define it as I'm okay even if, which is striving towards taking responsibility for defining and creating our own reality. It's a movement towards becoming self-supporting, which is learning how to identify and meet our own needs. And I want to qualify that a little bit because sometimes when we talk about being self-supporting, what I notice is people think that means that you have to figure out how to do everything by yourself. And I don't want anybody to leave here with that idea. Being self-supporting, in my opinion, isn't that you have to do everything yourself. It's that you take responsibility for getting your own needs met, which can and often does come through other people, because obviously we're all dependent on society and the infrastructures of society and the people around us. No one can exist in a vacuum. And so we certainly need each other. But there are healthy and unhealthy dependencies. I think it's helpful to think about it that way. And so the principle of emotional sobriety that I would like to talk about today is what I call emotional center of gravity. And for just a kind of a basic explanation of how I think about and define this concept is in martial arts and boxing and things like that. And so if you take a person and you have them step their feet directly next to each other and they stand there just straight up and you push them in the chest, what's going to happen? They're going to fall straight backwards. They're not going to be able to support themselves. And so what the first thing you learn when you take any sort of martial art is learning how to space your feet apart. And so there's fighting stances and things like that. And what happens when you start doing that is you're able to get pushed and knocked around and not just fall over right away because you have the ability to support yourself. And so that's sort of an easy way of thinking about what it means to have a center of gravity. But what I would like to talk about is how to bring that into a sense that's relevant to emotional sobriety, which is in an emotional sense. And so how we do that, and I'll kind of work into it here on this slide, which is emotional center of gravity is a necessary component of emotional I read that really wrong. A necessary component of emotional sobriety is addressing our dependency on people, places, and things to be how they are supposed to be, or how we need them to be in order to be okay. In order to become emotionally sober, it is necessary to keep our emotional center of gravity inside of us. It is not anyone else's responsibility to take care of us. When an upsetting or disturbing event occurs, an emotionally sober person strives for taking responsibility instead of blaming the person or situation or victimizing themselves. They strive for not demanding that the person or situation change in order for the person to be okay. They strive for identifying their own needs and taking responsibility for meeting those needs. And they strive for working on becoming the defining force in their reality. And I want to make clear one really important operative word, which is strive, because one thing that I've come to understand, I'm sure a lot of you do at this point, is we can have a lot of right ideas and right principles, but executing them and integrating them into our lives is much more important or difficult, I mean. And it's something that we very rarely get right. We get a little bit better at it all the time, but it's more about the ideal and the goal that we're moving towards, instead of having an expectation that we're going to be able to get this right all the time, because we won't, and that'll just be a setup. And so, another concept of emotional center of gravity is understanding that the problem is not the problem. The problem is how we relate to the problem. And so I don't know if I lead into that, but if it's not on this next slide, I'll explain what I mean by that. So yeah, I'll explain that. So I see it with myself and with the people that I work with. That'll get people that'll come to me and they'll say, this person isn't treating me right. They're not talking to me the right way, or people are acting wrong. I think about it when I'm driving around and I just see people that are just driving terribly, and I get so angry is my first impulse, because these people are not putting the same amount of importance and consideration into the same driving rules that I put importance on. And so the way that I approach these things is I want to get all these people to start acting the way that I think that they should be, so that the world can be better, in my eyes. And so then the problem is that everybody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when you define the problem that way, you become emotionally dependent, because you need that person or that situation to be different in order for you to be able to cope with it. And so if you think about, a center of gravity, that would be putting it outside of yourself, because the thing has to change in order for you to be okay. And it puts you in a position of dependency and lack of control, where you just get blown around by the wind. And so the big shift happens when you start understanding that the problem isn't the problem. The problem isn't the person that you're arguing with. It isn't the situation that you're upset with. It's how you are experiencing and relating to whatever that problem is. And it's when you're moving towards emotional sobriety, the focus becomes about whose responsibility to change is it? Is it the other person changing or the situation changing, or is it you learning how to accept life on life's terms and how to see things as being okay the way they are, even if it isn't the way you prefer them to be, and making adjustments on your end instead of demanding or expecting the situation or the people to change? And that to me is the biggest shift. It's a hard one for myself at this point, even to keep in my mind. It's so easy for me to slip into thinking that my upsettedness is other people's problem. And again, kind of by defining it by its opposite, when an upsetting or disturbing event occurs, an emotionally dependent person blames others. They see things as happening to them, and they take things personally, and they have demands that they try to enforce on the people around them, and they expect others to anticipate and meet their needs without communicating them, so taking care of them, and they victimize themselves. Again, it's another form of seeing things as happening to you. You're a victim of your circumstances. Yeah. Another component of emotional sobriety, which is related to the putting your emotional center of gravity outside of yourself, is this concept of unenforceable rules. And so I think about it like this: is that, when we're growing up, when people are growing up, we all get a lot of ideas from people around us, mostly our parents, because that's who we learn how to be people from, about how we're supposed to be, how things are supposed to be, how we're supposed to handle situations, how other people are supposed to handle situations. Basically, all the shoulds and supposed tos, they are developed early on in life. And so I think about it in terms of, it's almost, I for some reason, I think about it like a scroll. It's like a scroll you have that you've got this very long list of rules, and you're going around all throughout your day. And whenever people are violating your rules that you created that they don't even know about, by the way, you get upset at them. They talk to you in a certain way that you don't think is acceptable, or they use words that you don't think are acceptable. And you violated rule, 63 subsection B. And so now I'm upset at you. And there's a certain arrogance that comes with that type of thinking. That we get to decide how things are supposed to be. And so what they are, in essence, I think, is they're internalized ideas that we took in from our environment growing up that we haven't critically examined and seen if they fit for us at all, if they actually make sense, which I think we all find at a certain point that they don't. Well, I hope so. And so I was thinking today about how to, because I was listening to the talk, and a lot of the questions were about integrating these ideas, how to bring them into your life. And so I thought of some situations that I've run into personally and professionally that I think help understand some ways of looking at emotional dependency, and also what you can do about it. And so I have some quick little call them vignettes or samples. So this one I wrote for myself today, which is my dependency is needing other people to validate, accept, and approve of me. And so I come in here today and I'm very anxious, and I still am, and it's affecting my presentation because I had a lot more ideas than I have said to all of you, but my brain is working at some reduced capacity. And so things are just slipping out of my mind. And it's all based on this idea that I need other people to accept me, to love me, to approve of me in order for me to be okay. And so then all of my behavior and all of my focus gets placed on trying to make that a reality. And so then I'm thinking about how can I share these ideas that people are going to like, and, so on and so forth. And it's very destabilizing, again, because my well-being gets dictated by how all of you receive me today. Instead of having it be an idea that I contain inside of myself, is just knowing, I know what I know about this stuff, and I know what I know about what I'm talking about today. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to do the best that I can. And, it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be pretty. And some people aren't going to like it. And, there's probably some of you out there saying, who's this guy? And what is he even talking about? And that's okay, because I don't have to make everybody happy, and I'm not going to. And so, in order to maintain my emotional center of gravity, I strive to accept myself as I am and be okay with what I don't know. I can be smart. I can also be really dumb. And sometimes I have it together and sometimes I don't. An idea that I've been working really, really hard on making it mean something special to me is that all of me is welcome. Which is, it's all the pretty sides of me, but also all the ugly, warty sides of me that I hate to show people. But all of me is welcome. All of me is okay. I have to say that to myself pretty frequently because I forget that quite often. So that one is just particularly relevant to me. This one, I was working with a family. The son I work with individually, I was also working with the family, and he asked me to give him a shout out. So I told him I'd tell the story in the meeting today. It's really relevant to the subject also. And so another way of putting our emotional center of gravity outside of yourself is needing other people to consider you and treat you with respect, or what you define as respect. And so I was with this family, and I've been working with this teenage son, and he's been having a really rough time lately. He's been engaging in some really self-destructive behavior, and he's been having trouble getting his arms around it. And so Alan and I have been working together with this family and trying to help them figure out how to negotiate through this situation. And so, one of the things is the son has been lying a lot. And so we've been working really hard on getting him to be able to be straight up with himself and with other people. He's been having a tough go at it. And so over the week prior to the session, the kid's father, who has been giving him a hard time about lying, had asked him to lie in a situation. He said, if my friend asks you about where you were at so-and-so time, tell him you were working, because he was doing something that was related to some of the trouble that he's been getting into recently. And the son got really upset, and he said, you're telling me to lie, but you've been telling me to be honest. And so the dad, he rolled it back and he said, you're right. Just tell the truth. It's fine. But during the session, we were talking about it, and the son was talking about what it meant to him that his father was telling him to lie, and how difficult of a position that put him in. The dad started laughing. So he started just sort of chuckling in silence, and the son got enraged. He saw the dad laughing, and he just started yelling and screaming, and he took his laptop, he slammed it shut, and he just left. He left the meeting. And so in that moment, he became incredibly emotionally unstable because he had his center of gravity outside of himself. He had an unrealistic expectation and a demand about how his dad was supposed to treat him. And when it wasn't satisfied, he broke one of his rules on his list. He became enraged and lost control and just became incredibly aggressive. And it was based again in one of these dependencies. And so, the solution, I think, is it's striving to accept people as they are and trying not to take their behavior personal. We actually found out that the dad was laughing because he was embarrassed that his son called him out in front of, Alan and myself, that he had made quite a mistake in that moment when he asked his son to lie. He didn't see it in the moment, but he saw it afterwards. And so the laugh actually had nothing to do with what the son was saying. It was him being embarrassed and ashamed of what he had done. And getting called out on it. And so it's interesting the way that we can twist and take these things and give meaning where there isn't meaning. This is another one that this one makes me laugh. I've been really nervous leading up to this talk because, again, I always put so much pressure on myself. And so I was talking to my girlfriend about about how nervous I was and the things that I was doing to try to stabilize myself. And so I was talking to her, and I was really kind of freaking out in the moment. And then halfway through my little presentation, my spiel, she says to me, because we got two dogs, they're almost a year old now. She looks at me, and in the middle, she interrupts me and she says, "Do you think that we should get our dog's toenails painted?" And she's behind me, and so I can hear her laughing because she knows how silly it was. But in that moment, I laugh at it now because it's so ridiculous. But my first reaction is like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Like I'm sitting here talking about something that's intensely personal and important to me, and it just doesn't even feel like you're listening. You're talking about getting the dog's toenails painted. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And I think that there's part of that that's understandable, but again, the reason that I got upset is because I had an expectation and a demand that she understands how important what I was talking about was to me, and that she needs to treat it with as much respect and importance as I do. And if she doesn't, I'm going to get upset at her and try to chastise her and demand that she place the same amount of importance on it as I do. And it's just, saying it out loud again is something that just helps me become aware of just how absurd the idea is. And, frankly, if she wants to talk about dogs getting their toenails painted, that's her prerogative. And I can have a preference that she meet me and support me, but she's not always going to be available. And frankly, it's not her job. And so, that's where I added this part is if you can't get what you want, you either give it to yourself, which I think is a cool concept. I'll explain that in a second in a bit more detail. Or you find someone else who can give it to you that's available in that moment. And that's okay too. It's not their responsibility to take care of you. That's important. But the part about giving it to yourself it's a really cool idea, I think, for me, because what it comes from is this idea that we're all, we all start as kids and we have parents, and we have all these expectations of how parents are supposed to be, and they're, how they're supposed to support us. And inevitably all our parents fail, to varying degrees. They aren't able to meet us in exactly the way that we want to be met. And so we get upset at our parents, and, I'm no exception to this, about, you're parenting me bad, or you were a bad parent, you screwed this up, and now I'm screwed up. And part of becoming emotionally sober is learning how to become the parent that we didn't have. And so all of these things that we wish that we could get from people, and all these ways that we wish that our parents and other people could support us, there's actually a way of figuring out how to give that to yourself, and to give yourself the love and the understanding and respect that other people might not have given you in your life. And that's another way. It's another great way of bringing your emotional center of gravity inside of yourself. By the way, I don't know exactly how long the talk is. I'm almost done. It might be on time, but I think it's okay. So I'll just wrap this up in a little bit. This is another situation that happened. My girlfriend and I, we moved in together into our new house the day that the stay-at-home order started in California, March 13th of last year. So the day we moved in was the day the stay-at-home order started. So it's been it's the first time we lived together. So it's been a trial by fire for our relationship. And what was happening to us is that my family lives really close by, and they're very loving and very caring people. And so what happens is they would, they'd stop by often, and they'd drop off stuff for us, or they'd come and help. My dad's he's a contractor, so he'd help me come fix stuff with the house. And sometimes they'd show up with no warning. And sometimes they would, but we weren't available. And then there'd be these conflicts where we'd have to send them away because we weren't available to help them or to walk them through. But what ended up becoming a big issue was my girlfriend started feeling as if she didn't have any space for herself. She didn't have a sense of privacy, or you could call it something like that. And so it got to the point where she was feeling so trapped by people coming over when she didn't want them over, when they weren't expected, and feeling like people were just going to show up all the time. She had so much anxiety. She actually went and tried to hurt herself one day. And she went to treatment to go. She's okay with me sharing this. I talked to her about it beforehand, but that's how serious this stuff can get. And I'm sure all you understand that. That's what brings us into addiction in the first place, I think. The addiction is the solution to the problem, and the problem, I think, is emotional dependency. But it really came to a head with one day that she pulled my mom aside for a conversation, and she said, because my mom showed up without warning her one day, and she said, "Look, I want you to just understand that I don't want you coming here without telling me that you're coming here ahead of time. I'd like to know when you're coming, and I'd like to let you know whether or not that works for me." And my mom, being the person that she is, she has a tendency to take things pretty personally, but also, in her eyes, she's just trying to show love and care, and here she is getting rejected for doing something that she thought was very loving and helpful. And so she got very upset. My mom got very upset about this, and they got into an argument, and my mom ended up leaving, and my girlfriend was so upset about it because she could not tolerate the fact that my mom was upset with her because she held a boundary. And so it's a tough one, because I think probably almost all of you here can relate to the idea that sometimes you need to take care of yourself, and other people don't like that. And for people like me and for my girlfriend who have, some degree of codependency or emotional dependency, whatever you'd like to call it, that's a hard prospect, because you're going to have people that aren't going to like you or aren't going to be happy with you. They're going to be upset at you. Eventually what she came to terms with is striving to understand that you can't have it both ways sometimes, and that your responsibility is to take care of yourself at all times. And sometimes people aren't going to be okay with that. And you just have to be okay with, the fact that you aren't going to have close relationships with everybody in your life, and you're going to be closer to others. And some people aren't going to like the way that you decide to conduct yourself and live your life. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it's something that's also true. And that's been something that's been really helpful for her. And I have one, it's my last slide, but I have one more story, and I hope these aren't being too redundant. I hope they're helpful, because they help me understand things. But last night, again, I was talking, I have a 93-year-old grandma. She's from Shell Lake, Wisconsin, and she's got some very different ideas about how life is supposed to be than I do. And so she found out that I was giving this talk, and she pulls me aside. We were having a dinner at my sister's house last night. She pulls me aside and she goes, "Brian, I have a really important question. What are you wearing for your talk that you're giving tomorrow?" And I said, "I don't know, Grandma, probably just a t-shirt." And she went, "Oh, God," like with this disgusted look on her face. And I'm serious. I'm not like overselling it. She said, "Man, you gotta," where I come from, people they dress up. They wear collared shirts, long sleeve shirts, and a tie and a sport coat. She said, "I see that people don't wear ties anymore, so that's okay. But you gotta wear a collared shirt and a sport coat so that people, they take you seriously, because they're going to look at you and they're going to think, who's this guy wearing a t-shirt?" And I know my grandma pretty well at this point. She just has some real different ideas. She's from a different time, and she's almost 100 years old. It's pretty crazy. My first reaction, I tried to engage with her a little bit, because she doesn't understand emotional sobriety. And so I said, "Well, Grandma, it's funny you mentioned that, because it's kind of what my talk is about tomorrow, is that I think that everybody's got these ideas about how other people are supposed to live their life. And I've got this idea that rules are for you and not for other people. Your rules are for you. If you want to wear whatever you want, go feel free to wear whatever you want. But when you start trying to impose on me what I'm supposed to be wearing, and then get disgusted and upset at that I'm not going to wear the shirt that you want me to wear, you're getting so upset over something that I see as completely inconsequential. I'd like for the content of what I'm talking about to be the deciding factor in whether or not my presentation was helpful, not the type of shirt I was wearing. And so I was trying to engage with her, and she just does not get it. And so I was getting frustrated with her because she wasn't thinking the way I was supposed to think. And I started getting upset. I had this thought in my head. I was like, what the hell, Grandma? Like, you're supposed to be supporting me. You're supposed to give me tell me I'm going to do a good job and that I'm going to do great. And here you are talking about what kind of fucking shirt I should be wearing. And I had that idea in my head. It's like, what the hell kind of grandma says stuff like that? And, it's so interesting because I was thinking about that because it was such a good example. And I felt ashamed actually last night when I was thinking about it, because I realized that if I'm able to get past my way of thinking about how people are supposed to support me, then I'm able to get connected to and get closer to who they actually are. And so here's my 93-year-old grandma. And she is trying in her most sincere and loving way to help me in the way that she knows how to help me, which it wasn't particularly helpful or effective, feedback. I don't think. Maybe some of you actually agree. They're like, why is this guy wearing a fucking t-shirt? But I don't think it's particularly helpful. But I got upset at her for not supporting me in the way that I wanted her to support me when she was showing me love in her way. She was caring for me in the way that she knew how, in a way that meant something to her. And I couldn't see that because I was so focused on, I'm going to show my grandma that she's wrong and that she doesn't understand, because she's always going around telling people what they should be doing. And she didn't get it. And then I think she's, I look down at her for it. And I got to tell you, it's so crazy to me how twisted up this stuff can get. In how we can take these acts of love and kindness in such personal ways. I can do that, and where I completely lose sight of what's happening, and I lose all perspective, and I take things personally. So my grandma, if you listen to this talk, I'm not wearing a collared shirt. So I'm sorry, because it's audio, so you won't be able to see me. But thank you for caring. So really that's sort of the last bit of what I have to say. I was preparing a lot for this talk. I had a lot more I wanted to say. I'd say I lost about half of what I wanted to tell you all today. And so it's just not available to me right now. And so maybe what we can do is jump to questions, and then maybe some of your questions or shares, whatever you'd like to do, will prompt some of the stuff that I would have liked to have said, and we can try it that way. So that's I think where I'll stop for now. So I'll stop sharing. I will go back to my face. If I can pause share. Oh, there we go. Red button. All right.
Thank you, Brian. That was just wonderful. And like I said, we have a recording, so everybody that will be available to you, and I got a great deal out of it, and I will want to listen to it again. And I really appreciate all that you brought to us, all that information. That's wonderful, Brian. Thank you.